All right, so, and don't mind me checking my notes occasionally. I don't want to miss anything good. So, we do need a clicker. All right. Okay, so like I said, we're talking about animal stories. Why animals? Why stories? Stories have been a useful tool in sharing a lot of different things throughout the ages. Whether it's for educational purposes, entertainment, sharing cultural preservation, or instilling moral values. Stories can all do these things. What stories are trying to do is they're trying to have an individual share something that they want their audience to share with them, whether it's laughter or something like that. If they're wanting to share that experience with their audience. So they can be shared in a variety of different ways, whether it's orally, written, song, dance, theater, so many different ways that stories can be shared. And I'm sure you all have some recollection of things like this Native American here is showing potentially how to hunt or the features of an animal, where to find that animal. I'm sure everyone's got a campfire story, right? Ghost stories, whatever it be, but that moment where you're in the circle and someone stands up to share a ghost story or something like that. There's that moment. Maybe it's stories that we're collecting from our elders. Always something that has meaning that we're trying to give to our audience. Does that make sense? Why would we bring that to the interpretive program? Any thoughts? How can that be powerful here at the aquarium, Margaret?
Well, something will trigger something, and I'll tell a story to our visitors.
Yeah, wonderful. You're trying to share something with them. Very cool. Okay, so this could be factual information, or it could be something just fun and exciting that you want to share. So what I would like you to do is take a few moments and talk with either the individual next to you or in your groups about a time that you had someone tell you a story. You were listening to the story. And how did that make an impression on you? You can share that story if you'd like with your table. But what was that story? What did you learn from it? Did you laugh about it? Did you learn more from your ancestors? What was it? And think about the storyteller as well. How did they tell that story? How did they bring you in and make you feel welcome? Maybe they were somber about a situation. Maybe they were handed down an heirloom from one of their ancestors and it was a somber situation. Whatever it be, think of a story that made an impression on you and how it was told, and share that with your table or the person next to you. Okay? 10 minutes. What about those stories made them memorable? Why did you choose that story or those couple stories to share today? Anybody? It might have shaped who you are today. Yes.
When I was, when I was 13, I went to Hanauma Bay in Hawaii, and we have urchins here, just like down there. And every time I see an urchin, I always think of the one time I stepped on one.
That isn't something you forget.
It didn't puncture any skin, but I definitely felt it. I thought it was a rock. It was no bigger than a silver dollar, and I was 13. So, yeah, it was a pretty urchin. I just thought it,
What about stories that were told to you? That you were not the storyteller, but you had a storyteller share with you. See? Okay, this is where I hand it over to Will.
Right. So, we all tell stories. We all have stories told to us. It's kind of innate, right? So we're going to break it down and kind of talk about what makes it a good story. So, not necessarily the once upon a time there was a rising protagonist who had an antagonist and there's conflict and then there's a climax and resolution. We're just going to talk about theme and intriguing characters. So when you're out there on the floor, you know you don't have enough time to go over a fully developed story. So basically just the theme and the characters. So the theme, if you've been through the interpretive class recently, you know we talk a lot about theme. Interpretation is meaningful, right? We're talking about premise. So so what about the story? You guys, I'm sure, have all had the experience of being trapped by a storyteller that the story just goes on and on and on, and you just get to the point, why are you telling me this? So it's what's the takeaway? And this isn't going to be necessarily laid out in stone. You can have the best interpretive plan written out and say, I'm going to tell this fabulous story. The guest is going to chuckle at this point and ask me this really engaging question right here, and I'm going to respond this way. It doesn't go like that. You can't script out these things, but it's nice to have in mind. So, for example, if you're talking about octopuses, octopuses are intelligent creatures that we provide enrichment for to keep them engaged. And you can tell a story about the octopus, and it can be a couple different things. It can be about the octopus facing a challenge, like having to open the jar to find its food, or the octopus doing something unexpected, like hiding or attempting to escape. It can have a lesson to teach about things. It could be, for example, for the aquarist taking care of the octopus. It could be a lesson to future aquarists on what not to do with octopus care. So we've got a couple videos here of our husbandry staff telling some stories. And as they go through these stories, try to pick out what some themes might be that you could use when telling this story in the future. So the first one is Brittany. She's going to be talking about Rosa, one of the Munchkin sea lions.
Another great story to share with guests is how we're able to keep our animals active and stimulating their mind and their body. Rosa, she has been trained to dance by waving her flippers back and forth or wiggling her hind end back and forth, which is really fun for guests to see. But it's more important for Rosa. This is a great way to give her some physical exercise by dancing. And it's also a great way to stimulate her mind by learning something new. And she definitely seems to find that fun, high energy behavior reinforcing.
So what's a theme you could pull out from there?
Exercise.
The training has meaning. It's not just fun and games up there when they're teaching Rosa how to dance. There's actually a purpose behind that. What's another one?
Keeping her mind stimulated.
Yeah, the mental and physical health. She's learning new behaviors. All of our animals are learning new behaviors all the time. And you can really see with the Munchkins because there's a lot of energy. They're really eager to participate and engage. All right, the next one we have Lissy talking about the turkey vultures.
So you guys know that we do lots of enrichment with our animals, and in the turkey vulture exhibit, one of the types of enrichments that we're able to do is scent enrichment because they have extremely great senses of smell. So we have a whole variety of oils and scents that we use, and our aviculturist Heather actually has noticed over the years that when we use the scents vanilla and eucalyptus, that Olive tends to pay more attention to those scents. So possibly it's a preference, but in any case, I tested it out the other day and I put those same scents out there, and sure enough, she's right. Olive went straight toward those two scents, vanilla and eucalyptus.
So what's something you can pick out from that one? Yeah, that's an awesome opportunity, awesome story to talk about the sense of smell of vultures, because that's kind of rare in the bird world. And then who knew something that eats dead things would have a preference or would be really engaged with eucalyptus and vanilla. I love that story. Anything else?
Intelligence of the bird.
Right, intelligence. I mean, they need these enrichment opportunities. It's not just some bird-brained creature. All right, and the last one we'll show you is Megan talking about Hobbs, the octopus.
Okay, so as many of you have heard and know already, octopus have lots of different personalities, and I want to tell you a little bit about Hobbs, who is our giant Pacific octopus in the cave currently. He came in at 5 pounds. He is the one that came in from Vancouver Aquarium, and he has the very stereotypical personality of a grumpy cat. and to the point where one of his favorite things is chasing things across the tank, ideally his net. So if I have the net in the tank trying to get something out, he will chase it around across the tank all day long, even more than his actual enrichment toys. So that's a little something about Hobbs that's kind of fun to interpret. And one time he even took that net and held it, and it looked like I had a pole pinned against him for a few hours, and that wasn't so great. He likes to make it look very dramatic, but he won't give it back once he gets a hold of it, so I try very hard to make sure he doesn't have that net. That's a little something about Hobbs.
Any things?
Personality.
Yeah, the octopuses are all individuals, which is not something you'd expect from an invertebrate, right? They all have their own unique. Curious, right? Anything else? Has anyone seen the net in there, Hinton? Because there's been a couple times you'll hear on the radio Megan will call to operations and say Hobbs took the net again. If you see him, he did that to himself. I didn't pin him up against the rocks. So I've heard it over the radio a couple times. So
There's I'd like to tell a story about something I saw.
Yeah.
Which is a really funny story. People don't necessarily believe. But there was a star up in the far upper corner, just a couple of arms sticking out on the glass. And Hobbs was wandering around, and he went up to that corner, and the star literally was running across the glass as fast as it could go to get some distance between the octopus and him.
Yeah.
Okay, so anecdotes or short stories often have 4 purposes. And those are to bring cheer or make someone laugh. So again, if it's just a educational or strictly entertaining story, it could be that you want your audience, to laugh as you had laughed when you experienced that moment. So I like to use the example of my black lab and the first time she experienced snow, because that's kind of a fun thing, to share. That she was, she jumped out, she was excited, she seemed to be really high energy and everything, and it was fun to see her biting at the snow and trying to dig in it and everything. So that's something that I like to share. I like to have other people laugh about it, and if someone else has a dog that has done the same thing, it's kind of fun to relate to each other with that experience. Another purpose of sharing anecdotes and short stories is to reminisce about people or places of times past. The last few days what we've been hearing are a lot of people talking about their ancestors, what they meant to them and what they shared with them of their experience growing up. To caution, so the example I use with this to caution is, it's one of those situations where, say when you're telling a story, you're saying, oh my gosh, I was late to my appointment, I knew I should have left the house early, but I thought I would just speed right through town and not get caught. And then I got caught. I got pulled over and I got a heavy speeding ticket. So, to caution, my story is to caution you, drive slow, leave the house early, be safe, right? And the 4th purpose is to persuade or inspire, such as to encourage someone to learn more about what you're teaching them. So that is incredibly relevant to what you do as interpreters at the aquarium. You might not have all the answers to what they're asking you, so you might encourage them to learn more once they've left the aquarium. So what we're trying to do with the aquarium's interpretation program is that we're transitioning away from strictly factual information. We're trying to incorporate some sort of a hook, some sort of a story, to engage our guests a little bit more. So I love this quote up here. It's, data satisfy the analytical part of our brains. They answer that, how is it possible kind of question. But stories touch our hearts. So that's where it makes it memorable. That's where it lasts, is when we feel emotionally connected to the story. Whether it's just a laugh or what, but it's something that makes it stick. Does that make sense? I have another great quote here. This I pulled from the most recent issue, or the November-December issue of the National Association of Interpretation publication. The quote is, "Effective interpretive programs seamlessly blend the arts and information. They're not only educational and enjoyable, but they stir the heart and soul to care. They help people discover, share, and evoke personal stories of connection to place." And I think that really sums up what we're trying to get with this interpretive program. Does that make sense? Any thoughts or comments on that quote or the previous?
I think it ties into our mission statement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So we're not asking for a song and dance when you're interpreting. It's definitely not what we're asking, but we are asking for considering another approach in addition to what you already do as interpreters. And part of this is using authentic questions. We've talked about this in the interpreter training most recently. And it's one of those interpretive tools that really engages the guest in thinking for themselves and coming to different conclusions maybe. So, for example, when you're at the touch pool, as opposed to just saying, "Oh, welcome to the touch pool. This is a giant green sea anemone. This is a bat star. This is," and answering all of their questions for them, get them to think about it first. Does that make sense? And I know we don't all have the answers to the questions. I know many times we have someone ask us a question that we honestly don't know the answer to, and that's okay. That's perfectly okay. We are human, we're not encyclopedias. We cannot memorize everything, right? So that's where we get them to think for themselves. Like, oh yeah, I wonder. That will inspire them to wonder about something. I mean, think of the last time you really, really wondered about something. It's really hard this day and age. We just want to pick up our phone, like, you know what, I wonder how that thing works. Oh, I'm just going to look it up. I've got my phone right here. I'm just going to look it up. But have you ever tried to resist the urge? Do you remember not having your smartphones? And you're like, no, I have to really think about how this thing works. Yeah. So anyway, try and get our guests to do that. So just a couple examples of questions. Why do you imagine they did that? What do you imagine happened next? So you're halfway through your story, you're getting to the hook or the animal facing the challenge and how do they overcome. What do you imagine happened next? These are fun to ask guests that are kid age mostly, but also adults. I think adults need to get that interest and curiosity sparked as well. How do you imagine they responded? I like to use the example of our sea otters and how we provide their birthday enrichments, the frozen cakes and treats and things like that. How do you think they respond to their frozen cake treat on their birthday? That's just kind of a fun question to ask. So questions that might help begin your story. Have you heard about the time it snowed in the aviary? How many folks have seen it snow in the aviary? Just a couple folks. That shows you how rare that is. So if you felt comfortable and you asked a guest, maybe it's really cold that day and you're like, oh, have you been here when it snowed in the aviary? How do you think the birds reacted to that? That might spark some curiosity because it's so rare. There's only a couple folks who've actually seen that. That's kind of a fun thing to think about. You're like, well, we're on the coast. How often do you see snow? And what do the birds do when that happens? It's kind of fun. We've heard a couple stories throughout the sessions that, like, oh yeah, it was great. The birds were so into it. How do you think our otters celebrate their birthdays? This is especially fun with the kiddos because they're like, oh, well, I celebrate my birthday with singing and cake, and I don't see a sea otter doing that. But it's kind of a fun question to ask because you can open this up to a whole bunch of different things. You can talk about enrichment and how those are made. You can talk about our enrichment volunteers and what a wonderful job they do putting those enrichments together for the otters. Also, why do you think there's a Mr. Potato Head in the octopus habitat? You know, or whatever object is in there at the time. It's kind of a funny thing also to ask. Again, it implies that we're providing tools and enrichment objects that they can learn from and tease apart. Their mind and body are stimulated by these different objects that we put in there. So it's just kind of a random question, but it can lead you to a lot of different things when you're talking with them.
Okay, so I get to talk about the big scary word, anthropomorphism. So you guys all know this is like the worst thing you can ever do when you're out on the floor interpreting to people. So what is it? Who can tell me what anthropomorphism is?
Ascribing human traits to animals.
Right, it's basically Disneyfying the animals, right? Attributing human traits, emotions, and intentions to non-human entities. So not just animals, but plants, inanimate objects. So even though we know how evil and bad this is, do you guys still do it?
Yeah.
Right? It's human nature. We are social creatures. We want to relate to the world around us, and the only way we know how is viewing it through our own lenses, right, as humans. So it can be a really great tool for getting people to connect to nature, right? I mean, just think of Finding Dory and Finding Nemo. What effect that had on kids, connecting to these fish and everything. But when, oh, so there's some animals and clothes, classic examples. So why is this harmful? Any thoughts?
No, the animals aren't human.
They're not human, they're animals, right? Even though humans are animals too.
Yeah.
But supposed to pet birds. Right. The birds don't really want to be petted. So we're trying to view the animal's biological needs through our own human emotional needs. We don't know, we can't tell that the animal has the same emotional needs that we do, but we're trying to view it through us. And so when is that particularly harmful? Any thoughts? Basically, when we're trying to make decisions about the animal care based on what we are misinterpreting about the animals, right? Make sure I'm not missing things. So, big long quote for you guys. Anthropomorphism leads to an inaccurate understanding of the biological processes of the natural world. So that's what leads into the things like, I want to pet the bird because it really wants to be petted. Or my favorite question at the touch pool was someone was really concerned about the anemones in the back because they weren't getting petted and they would feel left out.
They should see the stars the week of spring break.
Right? So trying to adopt those wild animals as pets, thinking the baby raccoon will be so cute and cuddly and make an awesome pet, and then it grows up and
Boy, it's wild.
it's a wild animal. Doesn't work out that way.
One word, Jaws.
Yes.
I haven't seen this before.
So, what do you remember from the shark and Jaws? That shark had it out for people, right? Right. That shark was vengeful. It was sinister. It was conniving and plotting and out to get that boat in particular.
Hungry.
Right.
Hungry.
Right. So, not all sharks. No sharks are like that. But that image of sharks persisted. It lasted. It had a measurable detrimental effect on sharks out in the real world. So, yeah, and it lasts to this day. So, can you guys think of any other examples out there of negative or times where this has been a negative factor?
Well, Moby Dick.
Moby Dick, yeah.
The bear in Revenant.
The bear.
Yeah.
It just wanted to cut.
Birds.
Birds? Yeah.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. Right. So anthropomorphism is a really tricky thing, and you'll hear in all the videos the aquarists and husbandry staff are very careful about their word choice when they're talking. Remember the video of Lissy talking about olive. She did not mention that it was her favorite scent, that she was really liked it. She was careful to say that she was intrigued, or what did she say? I was forgetting. She maybe showed a preference to those scents. We don't know it's her favorite, but it was measurable. We could say that she did show preference. So I'm gonna turn it over to Beth, because it's not all bad. There is some uses for
Yeah.
So when can anthropomorphism be actually beneficial? Here's an example of the Smokey the Bear campaign. Started in the early 40s, right after Bambi came out. And so what happened with this was that there was a situation with a lot of wildfires happening. And they were trying to bring awareness to individuals, saying that you have to be careful. We're trying to protect the homes of the animals, right? And so they introduced these campaigns with Smokey the Bear. He's wearing pants, he's wearing a hat, he's obviously anthropomorphized. He's got these little cubs next to him with their big eyes, these little does with their gigantic doe eyes, right? Is this harmful to these animals? If we look at this poster and see them in their pants and their hat and everything, is that harmful?
Probably not.
Probably not.
Oh, yeah.
So
Think about your poor dog that the people get dressed up because they feel
I think that predated this like decades.
For somebody, it'll stick.
yeah.
To be careful and aware and.
Exactly.
I've known someone, obviously I was not born in the 40s, I was born in the 80s, but I've always thought of Smokey the Bear, like, being extra cautious when we go camping.
Exactly.
Because of the animals that are around.
Exactly. He's trying to teach a lesson, and the campaign was actually very successful. 95% of adults, and I believe it's 77% of children, recognize Smokey the Bear and the campaign that it stands for. And that's conserving wildlife and being responsible when you're out there.
Don't be careless.
Don't be careless when you're out there. So here's an example that it's a somewhat beneficial example of being somewhat carefully anthropomorphic. So a couple of slides here. This one is interesting because none of the animals are wearing clothes, right?
Right.
But what's happening here? How did you? I heard some brief chuckles and things.
Well, it was
How
the
did you?
egret on the, yeah.
Right? He kind of looks like he's having a bad day, right? But are we putting our emotions? We kind of think, gosh, I've had a day like that. I've had a moment like this. This poor bear who doesn't actually catch the salmon. It's one of those things where we're not necessarily harmful to feel that we're connected to that moment.
We're not putting our emotions on that. We're just responding to it.
Exactly.
Well, we're reading, for example, muskox's face as if it were a human face.
Exactly. Exactly.
Just crack up.
And so it's not necessarily harmful, but it is something to be aware of what we do. And as Will said, it's absolutely natural for us to do that because we're humans. I have a 2-year-old, and many of his books have these animals that are talking to each other, and they're dressed up in clothes, and they're sailing, and they're playing soccer, and doing all these things.
Well, think of Grumpy Cat.
Yeah, exactly.
Just because his face is marked a certain way has nothing to do with what the cat is feeling, other than he's probably very annoyed with all the attention.
Exactly. Think of all of those different videos and things of animals that we have to laugh at of what their behavior, what they're doing, things like that. So a couple other, feeling tired. This poor koala is feeling pretty tired. And then the kind of familial bond that these lions have together. So it's kind of a fuzzy, anthropomorphism is a fuzzy, tricky topic. But when we're not caring directly for the animals, when we're not going to bring this koala home because we think it needs a nap and it needs a pillow and a blanket, if we are aware that is not actually what this animal needs, that this animal is doing exactly what it needs to be doing, sleeping in a tree and doing its own thing, that's where we're responsible with our emotions and things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Any
A lot
other
of times, like
comments?
the koala, people don't realize how nocturnal animals are.
Right, exactly. And we try to, that makes me think of our octopus.
Yeah.
We do not, we allow those different spaces for them to hide in. We're not blocking off their hiding spaces because that's what they do naturally. And the same with the otters. If the otters do not want to be out, we don't force them to stay out. We make all of those things options for our animals. Encounters, presentations, things like that. Those are all optional for the animal. So.
And we can share those options, so people can kind of put it in context themselves.
Exactly. The same with the pelican presentation. I'm sure you've had to tell guests, oh, it was cut short because JoJo was not into it. Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine.
I've been
But we
out
do
there
have
during the
to-
sea lion training when they left after 1 minute
Yeah.
because they weren't following, they weren't behaving. So they cut the thing off, they came back 5 minutes later
Right.
and
right,
started
exactly.
over.
Exactly.
It was just like we're pulling the food buckets.
Mhm.
Think
Exactly.
about it. And I'll be back.
And that puts you in an interesting position when you're out there watching that, and then guests kind of might turn to you like, hey, volunteer, what's going on?
What happened there?
So what happened? The animal needed something else in that moment. There was a biological need that animal needed to do something else, and that's okay. We'll
Come back
roll with
later.
it.
Come back later.
So also when we share, so getting back to telling our stories at the aquarium, what we're trying to do is we're trying to invoke that wonder and conservation, that care and conservation of our animals, right? So when we share the story about Judge being abandoned on the beach in Monterey as a pup, without his mom, he could not learn to fend for himself, right? When you tell that story, you might be inspiring a little bit of curiosity from the guest, but also they might feel concerned about what happened to Judge's mother. We can't help but care about what happened to Judge's mom. And also that he was abandoned. We might relate to that feeling of abandonment. Who knows if he was feeling that, but he was left alone on the beach. Okay? So that's kind of an interesting story to tell that might, instill some sort of conservation belief with this guest. They might be inspired to care that much more and learn more about sea otters, their declining population, etc.
I just went to the Monterey Bay Aquarium and they have a little video about what they do now to raise pups so that they don't imprint on humans. They wear this costume, it looks like Darth Vader, this big black mask when you're caring for them. And then they're all covered up so the scent isn't imparted. But how far we've come since Judge was founded,
Right.
with that kind of
Right.
conservation effort.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Steve, did you have something?
I think it's important to remember who you're speaking to. Telling that story to third grade class is inappropriate. That story can be worked in about Judge to an appropriate age.
Right.
As always, you have to remember your audience.
Exactly. Very good point. Thank you. Thank you.
And you can also, the way you presented the story is to tie in why we're not a breeding facility.
Exactly.
And that these pups need places to go.
Right. Exactly.
So
So why did we put these images in here also? Psychological research has shown that vivid emotional experiences with animals, whether they're seeing them live in person, they're hearing them, they actually touch them during the encounter, things like that, that really makes that connection stronger. So that's the whole point behind telling our animal stories, is strengthening the connection that a guest has to an animal. Okay, I'm going to sum that up. We have to start somewhere to invoke conservation and curiosity. So what's the bottom line on using anthropomorphism? Use it wisely, right? They are wild animals.
Or I tell them I'm using it.
Yeah, okay.
No, I'm gonna tell
have
you
an
an
example?
example, and
Do you
this
have
is what
an
I'm
example?
doing.
Okay.
So don't think that
Don't think
it
this
just
is
makes a
actually
better
how it-
story.
Right.
You know?
Yes, Margaret?
And another example is with the urchin, the way I present it is, we like to say it's giving you a hug, but it really wants to know food.
Yeah.
Food, friend, or foe.
Right. And again, paying attention to your audience, as Steve reminded us. Because if you tell that to a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, it might not go over as well with the parents or anything. But exactly, they're learning, they're exploring what is touching them, right?
I find kids always find it fascinating if you say you might be food.
Right. Do I taste good?
Yeah.
We're wanting to inspire, invoke wonder and inspire conservation in these stories. So again, with the judge's story. But we are not the anthropomorphism police. If you have, as I've had a few different times, standing there at the sea otters because they're cute. The little 4-year-old comes up and she's like, oh my gosh, they were so excited to see me. Do you see they're swirling around and scratching at the glass? And you're like, actually, are we going to tell her that she's not
The reason for their excitement.
right? Are we going to tell her that? No.
But we don't have to force it either. Say, yes, that's what they're doing.
Exactly. Don't give in to that. But you can always share accurate information with young adult or adult age guests. But that little girl is having a connection to that otter that she's likely going to remember for a long time.
Remember
And-
when the candy billboard went out? So we had the campaign with billboards, and we were featuring our marine mammals. Come meet. So come meet Candy, our harbor seal. Beautiful billboard. She passed like 2 weeks after we unveiled her. Or a month, real quick. So I was at the Pinniped exhibit when a little girl came running up saying, which one's Andy? And I said, well, which one do you think it is? Because, you know, I can't tell one gray seal from another gray
There we
seal,
go.
so I wasn't the right person to ask.
Perfect.
So an animal came by and she says, I think it's that one. And I said, well, then Candy it is.
There we go. So she had her moment, right? She was still excited to see.
She was so excited,
Yeah.
and she wanted to see the animal she saw on the billboard,
Good.
and it worked.
Yeah. All right. So I'm gonna hand it over to Will for.
Okay, so now we get to play the fun game of good example or bad example of anthropomorphism.
Better or worse?
Right, yeah, it's, I don't know, we didn't really like the words good example or bad example, but
now
it
that
could
works.
Every event could be a good, bad example.
Right. So octopuses are happy to get new enrichment objects. Is that a good use of anthropomorphism or not? Why?
How do you know if they're happy?
They don't care if
Right.
it's new or not.
We don't know if they're happy. No, the octopus isn't saying, the octopus isn't telling us that, oh, I am so excited for this, thank you so much. That was really nice of you to hand me this new shiny toy.
And we don't know they can tell the difference between new and old.
Right, we know that it is engaged, it's interested, there might be food in there, but attributing happy, which is a human emotion to that animal, not necessarily, we don't know. What about octopuses are very intelligent creatures, maybe even smarter than the old analogy as smart as a house cat.
That's pretty subjective.
Right, but is, compared to the two, which one would be better to use? Right, they are intelligent creatures, and we can't really measure their intelligence, but it's thought that they're smart as a house cat. What about rockfish are not very active because they are lazy? What's wrong with that one?
They're not lazy.
They're not lazy. That is us putting our human values onto that rockfish, saying that rockfish should be out working for its food, out getting a job.
Should be out making a living,
Right?
building houses.
Right? It's just laying around at home. That rockfish is doing what rockfish do, is being a very good rockfish by just hanging out there. So, right. That's, again, viewing human through human values. And then our sea otters have the option of going behind the scenes if they choose not to interact.
That's fine.
That's fine. What would be a less fine way of saying that?
If they don't like you, they'll go behind.
Yeah.
Right? If they're feeling antisocial, they could go behind the scenes. If they're feeling grumpy and want to be alone.
Or if they're trying to hide.
Right? So, what about naming animals? This is a discussion we had in all the other classes on it. I think it's fascinating. What do you
In
guys?
my past lives, that subject has come up, and one of the institutions I volunteered at that moment, they were encouraging the volunteers not to disclose the name of the animals. Yet, we all knew the names of the elephants. And I said, you have to be consistent. You're telling the public the name of the elephants, but I can't tell them the name of that cockatoo.
Right.
I tell them it's for identification purposes. It's just like CJ when she goes to the lake bands on the birds. We can't name them all Bert. I mean, but it is a tough issue. But I believe any institution that has a decision on this, they need to be consistent throughout, which means we don't have Judge and we don't have Schuster if you guys are going to say don't name the animals. We tend to name our mammals.
Right. Well, they are all individuals, right? Each
Right.
one has its own personality and its own quirks, its own needs for care. Some can't have one thing, others need extra medicine, so you have to have a way to distinguish them. But how do you feel about connecting to something that has a name like Judge versus TP57?
Yeah, you
Does
like
one
Judge.
have more resonance than the
A
other?
little more different because it makes it, it's more like, like you named your pet, your
Right.
dog or cat or bird or whatever.
So, as humans, we can't help but feel more connected towards that named thing versus the numbered thing.
Well, they like Miss Piggy.
Mhm. Yeah, Miss Piggy's a great example.
That would depend on the volunteers.
Mhm.
Personally, I don't want to name anything.
Mhm. It definitely is a generational thing, or it's
It's the same thing as using the scientific name and the common name.
Mhm.
You have to be careful of your audience that you're talking to.
Mhm.
If you start using the scientific name, you may lose over half your audience because of the fact
Right. They can't relate to that. They don't know what you're talking
It's
about.
the same thing about the animals. You know, if you took me out to the otters right now and asked me which otter that is, I say, that's one of the otters.
Yeah, I can't keep track of
It
them.
could be one of four. It could
That's
be
right.
I can't keep track of them either.
Right.
Whether it was otter 14 or, Judge or whatever.
Right. But there's a really interesting, for the longest time in like science, they wouldn't name the creatures because they wanted to keep bias out of the care and everything. But they had done like a study on a laboratory that had individually named mice versus like the numbered mice. And whether or not they knew it, the named mice were healthier, better taken care of because the researchers actually had a more of a relationship, even though they were trying not to. It's just who we are as people. All right, so just a couple videos here of the keepers talking about their animals, and try to see if you can pick out some of the traps in here. So this is Lissy talking about our puffins.
For as long as I can remember, I've been watching this pair of tufted puffins in the aviary. Their names are 52, which is yellow-brown, and 79, which is blue and gray, for their band colors. And they're just a really cute pair that sit out really close to the public on the rock with the sign on it right near the pathway. So I've been watching them for years and years, even since before I worked in the bird department. And so this year I decided to go look up their file and see how long they've been together. And it turns out that pair of birds has been together for 20 years. So this is something fun to tell the public about. They get a real kick out of the fact that our birds tend to mate for life, and that they have long enough lifespans to have 20+ year courtships. So it's something fun to share with the public.
So first, do you remember which puffins they were?
52 and 73.
You guys are better than I am. I've watched this video I don't know how many times, and I cannot remember the numbers. So what's one of the traps? in that? Cute. But when you're telling this story,
You're talking about cute.
cute,
They're puffins. They're cute.
and they've been
As a married couple.
right. They are married for 20 years. Those birds are in love with each other, right? I'm doing this over Valentine's Day. It was really fun. It was topical. Like the birds are married. They're cute. Do we know they're in love with each other? Do we know that they feel love? Do we know that they have social constructs like marriage that they follow?
Well, they have bonded.
Right, they do bond and they do go back to each other year after year. But someone brought this up in another class. They still go through courtship every single year, and so they just happen.
They can opt out during the
Right,
course.
and birds have been known to swap pairs, and it's when you can't call it a monogamous relationship because they're not necessarily monogamous.
Well, I thought that was a story.
You can say they bond. to that.
Right, they do bond and they do go back to each other, but calling it love and married things.
I just use it as a time to explain the difference between pair bonding and monogamy, like the oyster catchers who are together all the time.
Right.
That courtship does renew that connection.
Well, I suppose it means, yeah, because they're apart the rest of the year.
Right, they're apart the rest of the
They,
year.
when
At
they
least
come
in
back
a lot.
together, they need to sort of reintroduce
You remember me from
themselves,
last
as
year.
it were.
All right, and Brittany has a story about Schuster.
One of my favorite stories is a story about Schuster, our 5-year-old southern sea otter, and he was given some live Dungeness crab. It's something that we can do sometimes to stimulate natural foraging behavior for our sea otters, and it's very fun to see how they interact. And while Schuster at the time, he was only about a year old, he was the first one to go right up to these live crabs walking around on the decking in their holding pool. He scooped up all 3, and he was able to shove 2 of them each in one pocket, and then he began his feast with his 3rd crab, while the other 2 older sea otters at the time, they were terrified of these crabs and didn't want to touch them at all. So just goes to show you Schuster's personality and how deep their pockets really are, where he was able to shove 1 Dungeness crab into each pocket when he was only about 45 pounds.
So what does that story tell you about Schuster, or what do you get from that story? Right? That he is greedy, he's taking all the crap. Right? He's fearless. So is Schuster really greedy? No, he's an otter. He's taking care of his biological needs by taking all the crabs. Who knows if those crabs will ever show up again, so he's gonna get what he can, right?
He's got 2 pockets, right?
He's got to fill them.
Right? So that's us putting those human values on him. And speaking of Schuster, let's go into when is it inappropriate to share stories? So you guys all get this going through the orientation, but it's always good to recap over proprietary information, things that aren't to be shared with the public. So things that deal with financial, new animals in quarantine, why do we want to be careful about sharing this information?
They may not make it.
They may not make it.
They might not make it to be on exhibit, not necessarily that they die, but they just might not work out. They might be bigger than we thought, and we all of a sudden don't have a space to display them. Or their tank mates might be incompatible. So we don't want to talk about the new animals until they're actually on the floor. You guys, if you're here with Oswald, remember it took him 8 months to get from behind the scenes to on the floor, and so there's those awkward questions of what's wrong with him? What are you doing to him behind the scenes that he can't be out on display? And we don't want to be like rubbing it into the public's face, like we have this really cute, adorable baby sea otter behind the scenes, but you can't see. It's not for you to see. So we want to, because then they feel left out, and you want to just but we do have these adorable adult otters. Animal medical procedures. Why is this one a tricky one?
Well, it would have been tricky with Ialic, was it, that really had urinary issues always?
So if the public does not, well, not just the public, if we as humans don't have the full story or we misinterpret something, we are going to try to fill in those holes with whatever information we already have. So whatever our biases are, whatever our assumptions are, they're called cognitive holes. So if you hear of Ialic having urinary tract issues and you don't know his whole history, you might assume it's because we're not taking care of him properly, that his tank is dirty, that he's getting infected from the water, things like that. So we want to be sure that we're aware of this, and that's why our PR manager presents the information. He likes to packet them and present them all, so to avoid those chances for misinterpretation or missed information. Animal deaths. You guys all know we've got old animals here, and death is a part of life. But same thing, we want to be able to present the whole story, not leave room for misinterpretation. It's really great when we can say, for example, Leah, she lived a very long life and outlived what is expected of animals in the wild. When we can present the whole story, it's a lot better. And personnel data. So the other story I always want to talk about or bring up as an example. Yeah.
Well, as far as financial, I would say most of the time as part of the presentation of the otters, which is a whole other story in itself, they mention how much it costs to feed the animal.
So when we talk, and that's a great point. So that is an awesome interpretive tool. But when we talk about financial things we don't want to share, we're talking about like attendance. Is our attendance up or down? How is the aquarium doing finance-wise? Are we like in really dire straits, or are we doing really well? That's not for the public knowledge.
The public didn't know when we were in bad straits
Right.
years ago, so
But if
there's no way of hiding that one.
Right.
No,
but
but they can contact I just
Oh,
tell
right.
them to contact the aquarium.
Yeah.
I don't have all the facts
Right.
to answer the
Right,
questions.
and we don't have all the facts, so it's better than talking to somebody who in the finance office who does know.
And, yeah, just something, I mean, in terms of how much it costs to feed animals, people are more interested in how much.
Right, and those things are totally
I mean, they
financial.
were, it takes 150 pounds of fish a day or something. They're interested in that. They don't care how much it costs.
Right. Steve, and then Steve.
Where does newsworthy information fall in? For instance, the rehabilitation with Bluey, the sea turtle that was rehabbed.
So once the, I'll try to be better about sharing those PR releases with you guys, but once the press release goes out, you guys are more than welcome to share that, because it's basic, and hopefully you're sharing the information from that. That's been the rule of thumb throughout the past. Once the PR has released it, then it's okay to talk about, and then it's okay to share. But just use your judgment. So the Schuster story, speaking of Schuster, with him breaking the window. So that is an awesome, it seems like an awesome chance to talk about how otters use tools and like to bang things to break open their food. But why, that is not a story that our staff likes us sharing out on the floor. And why, what can you see might be the issue with that story?
It took a while to get it repaired.
Right, it was expensive to repair and it took a while. But yeah, that he was maybe trying to escape, that he doesn't like where he lives, that he's unhappy and he wants to be free, right? So, knowing what you guys do you think Schuster really wants to have to get out and fend for himself? And what do you mean someone's not handing me food 4 times a day? So it's, right, it's stories like that where we can't control the assumptions the audience makes about those. We just want to be careful. Be aware of what you're saying and what potential misinterpretations the guest might. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay. So we do have some more stories to share with that.
So we have about 7 or so videos to watch. This is this sums up all of the husbandry talks that we have for you today. So we'll watch all of them right now. I do want to tell you, sorry, I did not at the beginning, but I have a booklet here with all these stories in here. You'll have this when you leave today. It's nice to have. And it's one of those books that we're going to keep adding to. So we'll get to that in just a second. But let's watch the rest of these videos. See if you can pick out different themes or different traps and things like that that might be in here. So enjoy the videos. The first one we have is Lizzie talking about our nearly blind puffin pair.
Another fun puffin story, we have a pair of puffins in the aviary, TP10, which is black clear, and TP137, which is black, red, blue. And they both have eye issues. They're really sweet birds, and they nest on the south side. Being that they both had eye issues and they were a mated pair, we really struggled with the idea of if we should allow them to hatch a chick or not. And we decided that we thought they could do it. So a few years ago, we gave them their first shot at hatching a chick. They did a great job with the egg. As soon as that chick was hatched, we made special accommodations for them by giving them little bowls of icy fish right outside their burrows so that they didn't have to go looking for food too far away. And sure enough, not only did they not need the bowls of food right outside their burrow, these parents put everybody else to shame, making several trips all the way out to the pool, collecting all the perfect fish, and doing an excellent job with their baby. So I always thought that that was a fun story, that our two little visually impaired puffins are excellent parents, and they didn't need any special help with their chick.
Any thoughts on that video? Any traps?
I think calling it a baby. Calling it a baby.
Well, I think the interesting thing is, I mean, the problem is that even what do we call it, an impaired bird in the aviary can deal quite well with its situation.
So what's interesting, I think, is that when we go back to our beginning of our conversation about stories, we have the themes and intriguing characters. And I think that's what these puffins are. They are the intriguing characters that are facing a challenge. And the fact that they overcame and could successfully take care of their
Under human care.
Anything else? Any other comments?
Well, she clearly loves her birds because she calls them sweet and cute.
Yeah.
Our next video is Mark speaking about the schooling fish.
So another thing that we do in the open sea exhibit is we feed our schooling fish 2 to 3 times a day. It can kind of vary, but we need to feed them constantly because they're constantly moving, and so they need to eat a lot. And anchovies don't really store any fat or anything like that, so they just kind of take it in and it goes right out. So they just need to eat all the time. So the way that we initiate to let the schooling fish know is we put a flashlight in the water and we kind of flash it 3 times. We kind of shine it all around the exhibit to let everyone see it. And then we'll slowly throw some pellets in, and then we mainly stick to flake food because anchovies won't hit anything. Once it hits the bottom, they won't eat it. So it's got to stay mid-water column because they just are, in the wild, they're constantly taking out copepods and anything that's just in the ocean. So they need to filter it out as it's in the water column.
All right, the next one we have Megan talking about the red octopus and little bean.
Okay, so another thing about one of our other octopus, Little Bean. She is a red octopus in the close-ups in Rocky Shores. Now, this is a different octopus than the one I'm about to talk about, but we used to have a red octopus that was found in a Pepsi bottle. You'll often see that Pepsi bottle in the close-up. It's currently being cleaned, or if you don't see it in there, it's probably getting cleaned periodically. Little Bean might also be in there. So even though she wasn't the one that was found in that bottle, it's something really fun to interpret. You can tell people that they found a little red octopus in a little Pepsi bottle. They really like to utilize those spaces, and it just shows how they'll squeeze into different things to make a little cave. That's something about Little Bean.
So Megan does a really good job about telling us how we can talk about octopus and their natural, habitats, and how they prefer to be in caves, protected, and also where they can leave their eggs and things like that. But that tells us a little bit about the natural history and natural habitat of those octopus. Anything else from that we can share?
Their construction of their body allows them to do this.
Exactly. What makes them a cephalopod? Yeah, I mean a vertebrate as well. Also, what I like to pick up here is that it's a Pepsi bottle. It's not just a small space. It's not something that she put in there. It's a Pepsi bottle that should not be found in the ocean. Can you pick up where I'm going with this? Pick up where I'm going with
It's
this.
an artificial octopus den.
Right.
You put on artificial reefs and
Right.
she's using them.
Okay, but it is a form of marine debris or pollution.
Yes, it is.
So there we go. Exactly. Okay. Our next video is from Mark again, and he's talking about the shark senses and how they try to adapt some of their target training.
So one of the tasks I was given when I was hired here was to progress the shark training a little bit. I first took that on by modifying the shark targets. And one of the things I did was add weight to the targets to kind of keep them down. Well, one day we did a interpretive dive presentation right in front of the Gleason room window, and the divers exited using a metal ladder we have to the side. After they got out of the water, we started an interpretive shark feed, but we left the ladder in the water thinking nothing about it. And we started the feeding session, which the small shark station is right by that ladder, and the sharks wanted nothing to do with it. They weren't anywhere near their normal stations. And the only thing we could come up with real quick was that the ladder was in the water, which is a metal ladder. And so we quickly pulled that up, and within a few minutes of that ladder coming out of the water, the sharks came back. So this is a great example. We're really aware of the ampullae of Lorenzini and how sharks can kind of sense electrical currents, but it's really difficult for us to picture that. And so that metal ladder was kind of adding some stray voltage that they didn't appreciate. And so we were able to kind of take that idea, and I went back and I took the weights off. And then I added a small LED light to the center of the target to kind of produce a small stray voltage that they would actually like. And that has greatly increased the amount of feeding behavior we see in our sharks now.
What have you learned from that video?
Sharks can sense electricity.
And they're aware of their surroundings.
Exactly. Hopefully, you also learned that our Aquarius staff learn from the sharks as well. So they're also learning and adapting how they can best take care of those animals and how they can best feed them. Great. Okay. A few more. Megan again, speaking about our wolf eels, she mentions that by the time you watch this video, they may have moved. And I hope you read the whiteboard that yes, the 3 wolf eels have moved to the Oregon kelp forest at this point.
There might be some of you Game of Thrones fans out there. I didn't used to be, but I'm recently starting to pick it up. Now, if you are a Game of Thrones fan, you will truly, I think, appreciate this next little tidbit. I have 3 wolf eels in the Rocky Community System. They're actually soon probably going to be in Oregon kelp forest by the time you see this video. But they have been named Ghost, Nymeria, and Greywind. Now, if you don't know what that is, they're based off of some dire wolves that are in the series, which are basically just regular pack of wolves that were pets for the royal family or a family that's in the main characters of that story. So if you see them, they are named that, and some fans might appreciate knowing the names of our dire wolf eels.
I think that's true for the Game of Thrones people. I think it's true.
Okay, we have 2 more from Sage. The first one is she's talking about how she feeds all the anemones that are out in the pasture.
So every day, the mammal department has a bunch of leftover food. So they go through all of their fish, make sure that it looks nice because they have picky animals. And so all the fish that don't look nice or know that they can't use, they actually give to us in the fish department. And we've been able to take that extra food, we call it the mammal leftovers, blend it up with an industrial strength blender, and feed about 5 gallons of what we like to call a fish milkshake through the pipe system in Orford Reef. So every once in a while, we're able to actually pour that slurry through a funnel into the pipe system of Orford Reef and then shoot out this fish milkshake through throughout the whole tank to feed all of the hundreds of little invertebrates, the anemones that are at the bottom. So if you ever walk through Orford Reef and it looks really cloudy, it's because it's shake time.
All right, last story we have for you. In Sage, speaking about the halibut tagging project, you want to bring about a years ago.
The halibut that we have in Halibut Flats, we're a part of a research tagging project. So our researcher, Tim, actually had the animals on site since 2009, where he used several different tagging methods on a couple different animals to see which ones would hold. So after 6 years, the research finally ended, and we were able to take on all of the halibut that he was using. So if you look carefully, some of them still have tags in them if you can find them, but pretty fun fact about our halibut.
Any thoughts on that one? Any listeners?
Well, I think I like it because it's something that we've helped with a bigger research project.
We collaborate with other organizations within the community to do different research projects. So this is it's a great example of working with outside organizations.
Well, it's also interesting because there's always the question, where do they come from?
Where do they live? Do they migrate?
Yeah. But I mean, you know, people ask when they say, well, where did you get them?
All right, so bringing it back to you guys, I hope this isn't all like fresh information. You guys are out there on the floor 20 hours a week, but where do you guys see yourselves in these roles? Did you before this workshop, did you consider yourselves as storytellers? Good, I hope so. You guys really are the voices of these animals and telling their personal stories out on the floor. So being here up to 20 hours or more a week, if you come every week, you guys all have your own favorite stories, I'm sure, favorite things you like to share. And Beth talked about the booklet a little bit earlier. That is not a final draft. We really want it to be a living document because we really want your stories. If you've subbed on other crews, you know that everyone's got different tidbits to share, and it's we want to collect them all. We really want to share that with everybody. So we're going to spend the next little bit. I want you guys to kind of talk in your groups. Do you have a favorite story that you like to share? Do you have a particular theme or topic that every time you're here, that's what you really like to get to when you're talking to the